Mary stood at the edge of the narrow country road and looked at the house that used to feel like the whole world. The sky was pale and quiet, and the wind moved through the tall grass like a slow warning. The house sat behind a leaning wooden gate, tired and forgotten, as if it had been holding its breath for years. The paint on the walls had peeled away in long strips. The porch steps looked weak. The windows stared back like dark eyes that had seen too much and said nothing. Mary had not been here in 10 years. She told herself she would never return, not because she hated the place, but because the place held too many memories she did not know how to carry. After her mother passed away, the lawyer called and spoke in a calm voice about papers, keys, and ownership. Mary listened like she was hearing someone else's life. She hung up and sat in her apartment for a long time, staring at the floor. Then she packed a small bag and drove all night. Now she was here, and her chest felt tight, like the air had turned heavy. She took out an old brass key from her pocket. The key had stayed with her through every move, hidden in a small box with a few photos. She used to tell herself she kept it for safety. The truth was simpler. She kept it because some part of her still belonged to that door. She walked through the gate. The hinges squealed softly, and that sound alone pulled her backward in time. The yard smelled like soil and dry leaves. A broken pot lay near the porch. A small bench sat under the window, covered in dust and spider webs. Mary stepped onto the porch and placed her hand on the door. The wood felt rough, scratched by years of sun and rain. She put the key in the lock. It did not turn at first. She tried again, gently, then with more pressure. The lock clicked. The door opened with a slow creak, like a long sigh. Inside, the air was still. It smelled of old wood, dust, and something faintly sweet, like dried flowers. Light slipped through the curtains in thin lines. Tiny dust bits floated in the sun like quiet stars. The living room looked almost the same as she remembered, and that made her feel both comforted and uneasy. The sofa had the same faded cover. The wall clock had stopped. A small table stood near the window with a cloth draped over it. A pair of shoes rested near the door, like someone had just taken them off and planned to return. Mary closed the door behind her. The click echoed through the house. It felt too loud, like the house was listening. She stood still for a moment and let her eyes move slowly from one object to another. She noticed a cup on the shelf. She noticed a blanket folded neatly on a chair. She noticed a small framed photo on the wall. It showed her and her mother in the yard, both smiling in the sun. Mary felt a sharp ache behind her ribs. Her mother had always been a quiet woman. Not cold, but careful. She did not speak in long speeches. She did not hug too often. She loved in small ways that were easy to miss when someone was young and impatient. She cooked warm meals. She repaired torn clothes. She waited up at night when Mary was out late, pretending she was not worried. Mary used to think that love should be loud, so she often failed to hear it. Mary walked forward and placed her bag on the floor. She opened the curtains and pushed the windows up. Fresh air rushed in, carrying the scent of grass and distant trees. The curtains lifted and settled again. The room seemed to breathe. She came here with a plan. She wanted to restore the house, clean it, repair what could be repaired. Maybe sell it, or maybe keep it as a quiet place to return to when life became too heavy. She told herself she was doing this like an adult, like someone who had moved on. But deep inside, she knew she was looking for something else. She did not know what, but she felt it. She started cleaning right away because cleaning gave her something to control. She found a broom in the corner and swept the floor slowly. Dust rose in the air, and she coughed. She wiped the table. She stacked old magazines into neat piles. She placed broken items into a box. She moved carefully, as if the house might break if she moved too fast. Hours passed. The sun shifted from one side of the room to the other. Mary worked through the living room, then the small kitchen. The kitchen counters were covered with a thin layer of dust. The cabinets held old dishes, washed and placed away long ago. She opened the fridge and found it empty. She felt a strange relief, like it meant her mother had been ready to go, at least in some small way. Mary found a small notebook in a drawer. Her mother's handwriting filled the pages. It was a list of groceries, garden notes, and reminders. One page said, "Fix the window lock." Another said, "Call Mary." Mary stared at that line for a long time. Under it, written in smaller letters, was another line. "Do not bother her if she is busy." Mary swallowed hard and closed the notebook. She continued cleaning. She moved into the hallway and opened the door to her mother's room. The bed was made. The closet was tidy. A scarf hung on a hook, carefully folded. Mary touched the scarf and remembered the way her mother wore it on cold mornings. She held it for a moment, then placed it back. When Mary returned to the living room, she noticed something that felt off. In the corner, a heavy cabinet stood against the wall. Mary remembered that cabinet, but she did not remember it being in that exact place. It looked like it had been pushed there with purpose. The cabinet was large and dark, and it did not match the rest of the furniture. Her mother never liked heavy things. She liked simple chairs, light tables, and open space. Mary walked to the cabinet and placed both hands on the side. She pushed gently. The cabinet did not move much, but she heard a dull sound behind it. Not the sound of wood hitting wood. It sounded hollow, like something hidden. Mary stopped. Her hands stayed on the cabinet, and her eyes narrowed as she listened to the quiet around her. She pushed again, harder this time. The cabinet scraped against the floor with a harsh sound. The hollow sound came again, clearer now. Mary's heartbeat quickened. She took a step back and looked at the wall behind the cabinet, as much as she could see. The wall looked normal. Same paint, same cracks, same age. But her mind would not let the moment go. She pulled the cabinet farther away, inch by inch. Dust fell from behind it like a curtain. When she moved it enough, she finally saw it. A small wooden door built into the wall, almost the same color as the paint. The edges were carefully shaped. The handle was small and flat. It was so well hidden that someone could live in this house for years and never notice. Mary stared at the hidden door. She felt a mix of fear and curiosity. She had lived here as a child. She had run through these rooms. She had cleaned this corner before. She had never seen this. Her mother never mentioned it. Not once. Mary reached for the handle, then pulled her hand back. She told herself this was probably nothing. Maybe an old storage space from the past. Maybe something left by the people who lived here long ago. But her heart did not believe that. The cabinet had been placed carefully. The door had been hidden with skill. This was something her mother wanted to keep unseen. Mary took a deep breath and opened the small door. A narrow space appeared behind it, like a secret closet. Inside were several boxes, stacked neatly. Some boxes were old and worn. Some looked newer, as if they had been placed there not too long ago. Everything was arranged in a careful way that made Mary feel like this was not just storage. It was a message. Mary pulled out the nearest box and set it on the floor. She opened it slowly. Inside were letters, tied in bundles with string. Dozens of letters. Maybe more. All written by hand. Mary lifted one envelope. Her name was written on it in her mother's handwriting. Mary felt her breath catch. She picked up another envelope. Again, her name. Another one. And another. The dates written in the corner reached back many years. Some were from her childhood. Some from her teenage years. Some were recent. Mary sat on the floor, still holding the envelope like it might disappear if she blinked. She turned it over in her hands. The paper was slightly yellowed, but the writing was clear. She opened one letter carefully and began to read. The first line made her eyes sting because it was so simple and so honest. It was the kind of thing her mother never said face to face, not because she did not feel it, but because she did not know how to say it out loud. Mary's hands shook as she held the page. She looked back into the hidden space and saw more boxes waiting. There was more than letters in there. She could see a small wrapped item at the bottom of another box, covered in cloth. Mary realized in that moment that the house was not empty at all. The house was full of secrets. And the biggest secret was not just that the letters existed. It was the question of why they had been hidden for so long. Mary stared at the wrapped item, then at the letters, then back at the quiet room around her. She could hear her own breathing. She could feel the weight of the past pressing closer. Then she reached for the wrapped item, and her fingers touched the cloth. And the moment her hand closed around it, she felt something inside her shift, as if she had just opened a door that could never be closed again. Mary sat on the wooden floor for a long time without moving. The house was quiet, but her mind was loud. The small hidden space in the wall stayed open like an eye that refused to blink. The letters lay in the box beside her, waiting with patience. She held the wrapped item in her hands but did not open it yet. Her fingers felt cold even though the room was warm. She placed the wrapped item gently on the table and turned her attention back to the letters. One by one, she untied the strings and stacked them carefully. Each envelope carried the same handwriting, neat and slow, as if every word had been written with care. Seeing her name again and again made her chest feel tight. Mary picked another letter and opened it. She read silently, her eyes moving slowly across the page. The words were simple. They spoke about small moments. Her mother wrote about mornings, about watching the sun rise through the kitchen window, about cooking meals and thinking of Mary. She wrote about missing her voice. She wrote about hoping Mary was safe and happy. Mary pressed her lips together and kept reading. One letter spoke about a time when Mary had called late at night, tired and upset. Her mother wrote that she wanted to say many things but chose to listen instead. Another letter talked about Mary leaving home years ago, carrying her bag with anger and hope mixed together. Her mother wrote that she stood at the door long after Mary was gone, staring at the empty road. Mary lowered the letter and stared at the floor. She remembered leaving. She remembered feeling trapped in the small town. She remembered thinking her mother did not understand her. At the time, she believed silence meant lack of care. Now she saw that silence had been filled with words that were never sent. She continued reading. Some letters were short. Some were longer. Some were filled with questions her mother never asked out loud. Some were filled with apologies for things Mary never knew needed apology. The letters did not blame. They did not demand. They only explained feelings that had lived quietly for years. As Mary read, hours passed without her noticing. The light in the room softened. Shadows stretched across the floor. Her eyes grew tired, but she did not want to stop. It felt like her mother was finally speaking, finally telling the story she never had the courage to tell while she was alive. Mary reached the bottom of the first box. Her hands moved slower now. She lifted the last letter and opened it. This one was dated only a few weeks before her mother passed away. The handwriting was slightly shakier but still careful. In the letter, her mother wrote about the house. She wrote that the house held more than walls and furniture. She wrote that it held truth. She asked Mary to be brave. She asked her to forgive. She asked her to look behind what could be seen easily. Mary closed her eyes. Her heart felt heavy but warm at the same time. She stood up slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the sky had turned a soft orange. The trees moved gently. The world looked calm, as if nothing had changed. But Mary knew something had shifted forever. She returned to the table and picked up the wrapped item again. The cloth was old but clean. She unfolded it carefully. Inside was a small wooden box. The box was smooth and worn, like it had been held many times. There was no lock. Just a lid that lifted easily. Mary opened the box. Inside was a bundle of photographs tied with a ribbon and a folded piece of paper. She took the paper first and opened it. It was not a letter. It was a note, short and direct. Her mother wrote that the photographs told a story Mary deserved to know. She wrote that it was time for the past to stop hiding. Mary picked up the photographs. The first few showed her mother as a young woman, smiling in the sun. Mary had seen photos like these before. But then the images changed. There were photos of a man Mary did not recognize. He stood beside her mother, close and familiar. In some photos, he was laughing. In others, he looked serious. Mary frowned. Her mother had never spoken about a man like this. Mary grew up believing her father had left early and never looked back. That was all she had ever been told. She flipped through more photos. The man appeared again and again. He stood in front of the same house, but it looked newer. He held tools. He sat on the porch steps. In one photo, he was standing beside Mary's mother, both looking at the house with pride. Mary felt confusion rise inside her. She found another photo and froze. It showed her mother holding a baby. The baby was Mary. Beside her mother stood the same man. His hand rested gently on Mary's shoulder. The man looked at the baby with a soft expression. Mary's breath caught. She had never seen this photo before. She had never known this moment existed. The man did not look like someone who had abandoned them. He looked like someone who belonged. Mary placed the photo on the table and sat down slowly. Her thoughts raced. Why had her mother hidden this? Why had she told such a different story? Why had this man disappeared from her life without a trace? Mary searched through the rest of the box. At the bottom, she found another envelope. This one was thicker. It was addressed to her, just like the others. The writing was slower, as if her mother had taken her time with it. Mary opened the envelope and pulled out several pages. This letter was longer than the others. It explained what the photos could not. Her mother wrote about fear. She wrote about choices made under pressure. She wrote about protecting Mary in the only way she knew how. She wrote about a mistake that followed her for years. She admitted that she had hidden the truth because she believed it was safer. Mary read every word carefully. Her hands trembled. Her chest felt tight. Tears fell, but she did not wipe them away. She wanted to feel everything. The letter explained that the man in the photos had not left by choice. Circumstances had forced him away. Her mother believed that keeping distance would keep Mary safe. Over time, the truth became harder to tell. Silence became habit. Habit became regret. Mary lowered the pages and stared at the wall. The house felt different now. It no longer felt like a place of stillness. It felt alive, filled with voices she had never heard before. She stood up and walked slowly back to the hidden space. She looked at the boxes still waiting inside. She realized this was not the end of the story. This was only the beginning. Mary understood that restoring the house was no longer about paint and repairs. It was about restoring truth. It was about uncovering the life her mother had lived quietly. She closed the hidden door gently, not to hide it again, but to save it for later. She needed time. She needed strength. As night settled outside, Mary sat in the living room with the letters and photographs around her. She felt shock, sadness, and something unexpected. Hope. Because now she knew the house was not only holding secrets. It was holding answers. And somewhere beyond these walls, there was more waiting to be found. Morning light entered the house slowly, touching the floor and the furniture like a careful hand. Mary woke on the sofa, her neck stiff and her eyes heavy. Letters and photographs were spread neatly on the table where she had left them. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned, clear and sharp. The hidden space. The letters. The man in the photographs. Mary sat up and took a deep breath. The house felt quieter than before, but not empty. It felt like it was waiting for her next step. She made a simple breakfast with what she found in her bag. While she ate, she looked again at the photographs. She studied the man's face carefully. His hair was dark. His smile was gentle. His eyes held a calm strength. He did not look like a stranger. He looked like someone who had been part of her life before she could remember. Mary folded the photos and placed them back in the wooden box. She knew one thing clearly now. She could not restore the house without restoring the truth. And the truth was no longer only inside these walls. She decided to step outside. The town had not changed much. The road still curved the same way. The small store still stood at the corner. The air smelled of grass and old wood. People moved slowly, like time itself had decided not to rush here. Mary walked toward the store first. She remembered coming here with her mother as a child. The bell above the door rang when she entered. A woman behind the counter looked up and paused. Her eyes widened slightly. "You look just like her," the woman said softly. Mary nodded. She did not need to ask who the woman meant. They spoke for a few minutes. The woman asked how long Mary would be staying. Mary answered honestly. She did not know. Before leaving, Mary asked a careful question about the house and its past. The woman hesitated, then pointed down the road. "You should speak to old Ben," she said. "He has lived here longer than anyone." Mary thanked her and walked toward the small house at the end of the street. It sat under a large tree, its branches spreading wide. Ben was sitting outside on a chair, watching the road. His hair was white, and his hands were rough with age. Mary introduced herself. Ben looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I wondered when you would come back," he said. They sat together in the shade. Mary showed him one of the photographs. Ben leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "That man," Ben said quietly. "I remember him well." Mary's heart began to beat faster. She asked his name. Ben said it without hesitation. He spoke about the man as if he had never left. He said the man helped build parts of the house. He said the man loved Mary's mother deeply. Mary listened without interrupting. Ben explained that the man left town suddenly many years ago. People believed different stories. Some said he chose to leave. Some said he was forced by circumstances no one fully understood. Ben said Mary's mother became quieter after that. She stopped explaining. She stopped correcting rumors. She carried the truth alone. Mary asked where the man went. Ben shook his head. "I do not know for sure," he said. "But I know he tried to reach out once." Mary leaned forward. Ben explained that a letter arrived from Mary's mother years ago. She read it, then walked to the river and stood there for a long time. After that day, she never spoke of him again. Mary thanked Ben and stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, but her mind felt focused. She now knew the man was real. He had not disappeared without reason. Mary returned to the house with new determination. She walked through each room again, this time looking for clues. She checked drawers. She checked shelves. She opened boxes she had ignored before. In the bedroom closet, behind old coats, she found a small suitcase. It was dusty but clean. Inside were folded clothes and a few papers. Among them was an address written carefully on a piece of paper. Mary stared at it. The address was not in town. It was far. Very far. Mary held the paper tightly. This was not a coincidence. This was a path. She spent the afternoon cleaning the attic. The attic was filled with old furniture and boxes. As she moved things aside, she found a small journal wrapped in cloth. It belonged to her mother. Mary sat on the floor and opened it. The journal was not written every day. It was written only during moments of deep emotion. Her mother wrote about fear. She wrote about choosing silence to protect her child. She wrote about missing the man in the photographs. She wrote about hoping one day Mary would understand. Mary closed the journal and pressed it against her chest. As evening came, Mary sat on the porch and watched the sky change color. She thought about the life she lived in the city. She thought about the life her mother lived here. She realized both lives had been shaped by the same hidden truth. Mary made a decision. She would not leave until she followed the address. She would not sell the house until she understood its full story. The house seemed to approve. The wind moved gently through the yard. The porch boards creaked softly. The place no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a guide. That night, Mary packed a small bag. She placed the letters, the photographs, and the journal inside carefully. She placed the address in her pocket. She stood in the doorway and looked back one last time before sleeping. The house had given her its secret. Now it was time for her to carry it forward. Mary left the house early in the morning. The sky was clear, and the air felt fresh against her face. She locked the door gently and placed the key in her pocket. This time, it did not feel like she was closing something behind her. It felt like she was carrying it with her. The road stretched long and quiet. Trees lined both sides, and fields opened wide under the rising sun. Mary drove with steady hands, her thoughts moving faster than the car. The address rested in her pocket, folded and worn. She had read it many times, as if the letters might change if she looked long enough. As the miles passed, memories rose and fell like waves. She remembered her mother standing by the window in the evenings. She remembered meals eaten in silence. She remembered questions she never asked. Each memory felt different now. They no longer felt empty. They felt unfinished. After hours of driving, the town on the paper appeared. It was larger than the one she grew up in, but still calm. Streets curved around small parks. Old buildings stood beside newer ones. Mary slowed down and followed the signs until she reached the street named on the paper. Her heart beat harder as she parked the car. The house in front of her was simple and clean. A small garden grew near the steps. Wind moved the leaves gently. It looked lived in. It looked cared for. Mary sat in the car for a long moment. She told herself she could turn around. She could drive back and leave the past where it was. But her hands opened the door on their own. She walked toward the house and stopped at the gate. A name was written on the mailbox. It matched the one Ben had spoken. Mary took a deep breath and stepped forward. She knocked. The sound echoed louder than she expected. Footsteps moved inside. The door opened slowly. A man stood there. His hair was gray now, but his face was familiar. His eyes were the same ones she had seen in the photographs. The man looked at her with confusion that quickly turned into shock. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Mary spoke first. She said her name. She said her mother's name. She said she came from the old house by the road. The man closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. He stepped aside and invited her in. Inside, the house felt warm. Not just in temperature but in feeling. Photos lined the walls. Books filled shelves. A kettle sat on the stove. It was a home shaped by time, just like the one Mary left behind. They sat at the table. The man poured tea with steady hands that still trembled slightly. He looked at Mary like he was afraid she might disappear. He spoke slowly. He said he had waited many years for this moment. He said he had written letters. He said he had hoped. Mary listened. He told her his story. He spoke about love and choices made under pressure. He spoke about being forced to leave to protect them both. He spoke about the pain of silence and the weight of distance. He said he believed Mary's mother did what she thought was right. He said he never stopped caring. Mary felt tears slide down her face, but she did not hide them. For the first time, she did not feel like a child asking questions. She felt like someone strong enough to hear the truth. She told him about the hidden space. She told him about the letters. She told him about the photographs. The man pressed his hand against his chest and nodded slowly. He said he knew about the letters. He said her mother carried love quietly. They spoke for hours. They shared memories from different sides of the same story. Pieces began to fit together. The silence that once felt heavy now felt understandable. As the sun lowered, the man stood and walked to a small cabinet. He opened it and took out a box. Inside were letters and photos too. Some were copies. Some were never sent. He placed the box between them. Mary understood then that truth had been waiting on both sides of the road. She stayed the night in a small guest room. Sleep came slowly, but it came. When she woke, she felt lighter, like something long carried had been set down. In the morning, they shared breakfast. The man asked about the house. Mary spoke about restoring it. She spoke about keeping it alive. He listened quietly, then smiled. Before she left, he gave her something. It was a key. He said it belonged to a small shed behind the old house. He said it held things he once left behind. Mary took the key with care. When she drove back, the road felt shorter. The fields looked brighter. Her thoughts felt clear. She was not returning with answers alone. She was returning with connection. When Mary reached the house, the porch welcomed her with familiar sounds. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air felt warmer now, as if the house recognized her growth. She went straight to the backyard. The shed stood quietly near the trees. She used the key and opened the door. Inside were tools, notebooks, and small projects left unfinished. It felt like a bridge between past and present. Mary stood there and smiled through tears. Restoring the house was no longer about fixing broken wood. It was about honoring every part of the story. And now, she was ready for the final step. Mary woke up early with the sound of birds outside the window. Sunlight touched the wall gently, and for the first time since she returned, the house felt fully awake. It no longer felt like a place holding its breath. It felt like a place ready to live again. She stood up and walked through each room slowly. She did not rush. Every step mattered now. She touched the walls, the doors, the windows. Each one carried memory, but none of them felt heavy anymore. The truth had lifted the weight that silence once held. Mary went outside and stood in the yard. The grass moved in the wind, and the trees whispered softly. She remembered herself as a child running here, laughing without knowing what the future would bring. She smiled at that thought. She began the restoration with clear purpose. She fixed the broken steps on the porch. She cleaned the windows until light filled every corner. She painted the walls carefully, choosing colors that felt warm and calm. Each task felt meaningful. She was not just fixing a house. She was honoring a life. As days passed, neighbors stopped by. Some brought tools. Some brought stories. They spoke about her mother with gentle voices. They spoke about kindness, patience, and quiet strength. Mary listened with gratitude. She realized her mother had been more present in this town than she ever knew. Mary placed the letters in a safe box and kept it in the living room. She placed the photographs on the wall, not hidden anymore. The man from the photos became part of the house story, not a secret. The house accepted this truth easily, as if it had been waiting for it. One afternoon, Mary sat at the table and wrote a letter of her own. She wrote to her mother. She thanked her for love, even the quiet kind. She forgave her for silence. She promised to live honestly and bravely. When she finished, she placed the letter in the hidden space, not as a secret, but as a final answer. Mary decided not to sell the house. She chose to keep it open. She turned one room into a small reading space. She fixed the kitchen so it could hold shared meals again. She planted flowers in the yard, bright ones that faced the sun. The man visited a few weeks later. He walked slowly through the rooms, touching the walls with care. He did not speak much. He did not need to. His presence felt right. Together, they sat on the porch and watched the sky change color. The house felt full. Not crowded. Full. Mary stayed longer than she planned. Then she made a choice. She would live between two places. The city for work. The house for peace. She no longer needed to escape her past. She had made peace with it. On her final night before returning to the city, Mary stood in the living room and looked around. The house was no longer quiet in a sad way. It held laughter, voices, and truth. She turned off the light and closed the door gently. The house stood strong behind her, no longer holding secrets. It had done what it waited to do. It gave its story back to the one who was ready to hear it. And Mary walked forward, whole at last.